the budget. The other thing I would like to say, as I said in my private meeting with the commissioners, and I am been very thrilled to be along with Dr. Santelises and her leadership. I appreciate her. I've never had a concern that she did not meet with me right on it. Whatever it was, she always took time to listen to me. And now that it's time to change, as those have considered this need to be changed, I need to be, I would like to be in forefront and a part of that person who's paid because of the special education. They need to know about our students and how and what they need. So that's it. And I thank you again, Dr. Centelise. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Ms. Phillips. We appreciate the comments.
I don't normally talk during public statement, but I just want you to know that I have considered it a privilege to work with somebody who works so tirelessly and so productively on behalf of other people's children. And long after your child aged out of this system, even though we get to see him all the time. And let me tell you, he is still my best dance partner, the BGU piece. I just want you to know, I have enjoyed your push, but I have enjoyed your partnership, and I have just been so inspired by the way that you advocate for all children.
Yes, ma'am.
And you don't just come out to create fireworks, you come out to get stuff done.
Yes, ma'am.
So thank you for the privilege of working with you.
Thank you, Ms. Phillips. I'd also like to welcome from the Associated Student Congress for Baltimore City, Benjamin Grimaldi, who has been here before the board and has been just a wonderful member of ASCBC and has helped me to understand more about the opportunities for young people. So welcome, welcome, welcome.
Hello, everyone. My name is Benjamin Grimaldi. I am an 8th grader at Thomas Johnson Elementary Middle School, an ad hoc member of ASCBC, and co-chair of the ASCBC Elections Committee. This evening, I'd like to share some updates on ASCBC's involvement in student advocacy and engagement of students across Baltimore City. Before getting started, though, I would like to thank the school board for this opportunity to speak tonight. It's a pleasure to be here. Applications for the ASCBC elections were completed last month, and the process has continued since. Candidates have submitted their materials and have been informed of the campaign regulations. I'm excited to share that we have had a record number of applicants this year. 4 students applied for the offices of vice president and student commissioner, and therefore ASCBC hosted a nominating convention for the first time in compliance with the election protocols developed jointly by ASCBC and the board. At our spring general assembly on April 9th, student delegates from 35 schools selected 3 of the 4 candidates for student commissioner and ASCBC vice president who will appear on the ballot this May. In addition to voting in the nominating convention, students at our General Assembly engaged with campaigning candidates and participated in student-led workshops to learn about how they can support student engagement in the May general elections. I'd like to thank the members of City Schools leadership, the board, and members of the Baltimore City delegation who attended to support ASCBC. Special thanks should go to Corey McCrae, who was our guest speaker. In addition to voting in the nominating convention or following the General Assembly, ASCBC's Elections Committee has finalized the ballot for the ASCBC elections. There are 3 candidates, each running for the office of Vice President and Student Commissioner, as well as ASCBC President. There are 2 running for the office of Middle School Executive, and there's 1 candidate running for the office of Secretary, 1 for Treasurer, and 1 as Diversity Committee Chair. We are looking forward to a great campaigning season, which kicks off May 5th. All 6th through 12th grade students will have an opportunity to vote between May 19th and May 22nd. ASCBC has also reviewed the district budget proposal from the April 8th board meeting. We were pleased to see that 20% of the school support budget is allocated to transportation and that a significant amount of money is allocated to math and reading resources. These investments reflect the priorities ASCBC has heard from students at the General Assembly and the Youth Budget Forum we hope to co-facilitate. We also believe that increased investment in mental health programs is important as it reflects feedback from students during our full issues assembly, where students ranked mental health support access as their #1 issue. Students' second highest priority from our fall issues assembly was school safety. And we noted that 4% of the school support budget is allocated to school police. We believe that school police are one part of a comprehensive school safety plan. And we hope that in the final budget book, city schools will articulate how investments in mental health, restorative practices, school police, and other measures that will contribute to students' need for safe and supportive schools. ASCBC has also been closely following developments with federal funding and the blueprint. We sent representatives to Annapolis no less than 10 times this legislative season and offered written and oral testimony on numerous bills. ASCBC members are currently planning to participate in a march on May 1st in solidarity with SOMO student organizers at Baltimore City College to oppose cuts to federal funding and current mass deportations. While we are relieved that Baltimore City Schools has dodged cuts to concentration of poverty grants, we know that we are in a tight situation financially and politically. We hope that the board and city schools leadership will see ASCBC as a partner in advocating for the educational resources, opportunities, and security Baltimore students deserve. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you so much, Benjamin. I really appreciate that. There was just a number of things that you touched upon. So one, with the ASCBC general election, we'll have some more updates from our student commissioner later this evening, Commissioner Rooks. And so we're very honored and thankful for both Commissioner Rooks' participation this past year on our board and his valuable perspectives in leading us, as well as all of ASCBC. Secondarily, I want to thank you so much for comments on the budget. That's really important for how we use these resources to serve young people and what the needs are, and hearing a little bit more about the issues priority. And then also hearing a little bit more about just the students' perspective on our kind of global state that's happening out there right now, and helping us to shape where we go next. So thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Our next public comment is from the Baltimore Teachers Union, our member Jocelyn Providence and city school teacher. So I turn it over to Jocelyn. Is she joining us virtually or in person? This will be a video tonight.
Good evening. My name is Jocelyn Providence, and I am a teacher in Baltimore City Public Schools, and I will be speaking tonight on behalf of the Baltimore Teachers Union. And tonight, I want to talk about the topics of end of quarter grading window, advocacy for financial investment in the blueprint for Maryland's
If you
future,
could start that over,
updates on the
that'd be great.
CEO search, and reflections on the harm of funding cuts. So I recently gave public comment about this, but I wanted to remind the board about the importance of adjusting the end of quarter grading window for next school year so that teachers have at least one, preferably 2 days where they are no longer accepting work prior to the end of the quarter, so that teachers are able to fulfill our professional responsibility of updating and submitting grades by the end of the quarter deadline. Now, school funding. The Maryland House and Senate just finished up their session and verbally expressed their commitment to the blueprint for Maryland's future. However, solely a verbal commitment while rolling back the implementation timeline does not set our students up for success. BTU knows that this board understands how important the blueprint for Maryland's future is for our students. For decades in Maryland, wealthy corporations have manipulated the rules to avoid paying taxes, placing the financial burden for our schools on the rest of us. Maryland gives away millions in business tax breaks, despite overwhelming evidence that they do nothing to boost our economy. And who ends up paying? Our students and our families. BTU hopes that this board will abandon its apolitical stance of the need for statewide tax reform. Maryland's upside and unfair system prevents progress. We need this board to commit to work with us to advocate for fair funding of the blueprint, which means that there needs to be advocacy around raising the revenue across the state. We invite this board to work with BTU to advocate to our elected officials to close corporate loopholes and raise taxes on millionaires. We believe this type of advocacy is needed from the board. The blueprint will never fulfill its promise and will be a broken promise from leaders that increases distrust with our community if this is not done. BTU is willing to do the important work with the board to achieve fair funding, but the board needs to actually advocate for this. Now more than ever, our students need strong advocates, so please step up. At the very beginning of the search for the new CEO of Baltimore City Public Schools, BTU informed the board on the importance of having public and consistent updates on the process and steps being taken in the search for the new CEO. Where can these public and consistent updates be found so that the community is aware? The last update shown on the Baltimore City website after me searching is from January 7th. That is almost 4 months ago. Which I do not think demonstrates consistent updates. We are all deeply invested in this search process and want to ensure that the new CEO prioritizes effective leaders capable of effective communication. This district's core functions of supporting and maintaining workers is in crisis. Departments like human capital and labor relations cannot meet core functions. BTU has repeatedly documented and informed this board and district leadership of lack of communication, lack of adherence to deadlines, and inability to meet basic functions of human capital department for key functions like staffing, payroll compensation, tuition reimbursement, and educator licensure, to name a few. Finally, we all know that the funding cuts that were inappropriately and disrespectfully done to our district budget has directly impacted schools, specifically funding for extracurriculars and tutoring. I wanted to share some of my personal observations of the harm that is occurring because of this. So students are being directly impacted by these funding cuts. Extracurriculars that play a huge role in keeping students engaged, learning, and building stronger relationships with themselves and their classmates and school community. And also vital supports like direct one-on-one tutoring has ended. At our school, additional tutoring support has played a huge role in the math supports and math learning for our students. It is much needed to close some of the mathematical gaps that we experience in our classroom learning every day. Because this person was not a classroom teacher, students were able to receive tutoring throughout the day, which was very impactful and was very direct support that classroom teachers were unable to be doing while giving instruction. It is awful that our students are the people who are the most impacted by these harsh and disrespectful funding cuts. This is also why I want to reiterate the importance of our collective advocacy for the blueprint that involves statewide tax reform. Budgets reflect our morals, and if we aren't willing to invest in our youth, our future, then what are we even doing? Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Jocelyn. I believe that takes us to the end of public comment. We didn't receive any signups this evening at all, but we do. Is that correct, Dr. Duncan? Okay, no general public comment this evening. Oh, do we have Ms. Demery? Well, let me invite Ms. Demery up. So we do have one recognized group that has not been recognized. So I want to make sure Ms. Demery has an opportunity to join and provide public comment this evening. Welcome, 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 welcome.
Okay. Thank you, but I did put in my, I guess I have to go back to the old way of doing it. I went
It's
through
all
that
right. We got you.
email. You got me? Okay.
We
good.
got you.
So I'm just glad I didn't have to follow Miss Billups or this young man who just walked out, was he's phenomenal. So thank you so much for the opportunity. Good morning. Good evening, everyone. You see, it's been a long, long day. So PTA was asked to provide feedback on the FY26 proposed operating budget. After review, the consensus is it's great to see where the funds come from and how they are allocated to the different programs. But the question is, what happens after the distribution? How will the money be used? For example, under academics, foundational math and literacy lists high quality instructional materials. For math, it's more than $750,000 to expand the high quality math curriculum. If students are still not performing as well as expected in math, are the instructional materials for the students or for the teachers to improve on the method of instructing? Another example under academics, well-rounded education includes money allocated to student learning plans and health education. Student learning plans already exist, so what specifically will be done? What part does health play in a well-rounded education? Another question, under wholeness, climate and culture, the budget calls for 58 school-based wholeness specialists. Is there a job description for this position and do they exist now? It also lists mentoring and adult relationships. Who is being mentored and by whom? We do applaud the district's efforts to give our students the opportunity to lead their peers, gain exposure to other like-minded students in different jurisdictions, and how to advocate. We realize the figures may change due to pending cuts, but the question remains the same. Specifically, how will the money be used to ensure the success of all students? We want to thank everyone who contributed to making the budget a success this year. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it very much. Before I close public comment, do we have any other recognized groups that are joining us this evening? Say that one more time. Okay, so specifically, if this is about charters this evening, is this about a charter application? Okay, so we are not taking any specific comments tonight on the charters. There's a presentation that will be made this evening. Let me just make sure I have that. So we have sessions that will specifically focus on that, and that's coming up, and we'll lay that out in the presentation tonight just so that you know. But we want to make sure that we create equal opportunity and equal access for all groups to provide comment on that. And so in tonight's presentation, when the staff goes through that, they'll lay out when is the appropriate time for the comment that's related to charter application. So just want to make sure everybody's clear on that. Thank you, guys. The board does appreciate all the public comment that we get. It's really important, but we do want to make sure for any of these particular things that we know are really important to our vitality of our entire community, that we do get those in the appropriate time and windows and seasons. So based on public comment, are there any additional items board members would like to pull from the consent agenda? Only 2 items tonight. Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the remaining consent agenda?
So moved, Esposito.
Thank you, Commissioner Esposito. Is there a second?
Second, Brooks.
Thank you, Commissioner Rooks. All in favor, Vice Chair Parker,
Yes.
Commissioner Ames Messenger. Thank you, Commissioner Coy.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner Esposito.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner Kenyatta Bay. Yes. Thank you, Commissioner Mohammed.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner Redding Lollinger.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner Rooks.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Thank you, Commissioner Slater Harrington.
Yes.
Thank you, and I'm in favor. This motion passes. I'd like to thank my board colleagues for that and the public comment that we received this evening. I'd like to turn over to Dr. Santelises for CEO comments.
Great. Thank you, Chair Sally. And before I get started with my comments this evening, I'm going to invite Chief Emily Nielsen for this evening's PEP agenda.
Thank you, Dr. Santelises. Good evening, commissioners. If you are here to be recognized for tonight's PEP, or if you're joining us virtually, if you can stand up or turn on your camera to be recognized when I read your name. From the Office of the Chief Communications Engagement and Enrollment Officer, an appointment recommended that Rochelle Boykingo, currently Staff Specialist Communications, be appointed Special Assistant Communications and Community Engagement effective May 5th, 2025. From the Office of the Chief of Schools, appointments. Recommended that Cole Bishop, currently Assistant Principal at Patterson High School, be appointed Principal Resident at Forest Park High School, effective July 1st, 2025. Recommended that Alana Burton, currently Assistant Principal at Leith Walk Elementary, be appointed Principal Resident at Cross Country Elementary Middle, effective July 1, 2025. Recommended that Shanika Peterkin, currently Assistant Principal at William Packett Elementary, be appointed Principal Resident at Northwood Elementary, effective July 1, 2025. Recommended that Shakia Shepherd, currently Assistant Principal at the historic Cherry Hill Elementary Middle, be appointed Principal Resident at Moravia Park Elementary Middle, effective July 1, 2025. Recommended that Theodore Spain, currently Assistant Principal at Joseph C. Briscoe Academy, be appointed Principal Resident at the Reach Partnership School, effective July 1, 2025. Recommended that Larry Strickland, currently Assistant Principal at Walter P. Carter Elementary Middle, be appointed Principal Resident at the historic Samuel Coleridge Taylor Elementary, effective July 1, 2025. Recommended that Caroline Weiss, currently Coordinator Social Studies, be appointed Assistant Principal at the Achievement Academy, effective June 2nd, 2025. And a reassignment. Recommended that Flora Haxon, currently Assistant Principal at Creative City Public Charter, be appointed Assistant Principal at Dickey Hill Elementary Middle, effective July 1st, 2025. Congratulations to everyone on tonight's PEP agenda.
Thank you, Chief Nielsen. And I would like to get started this evening in congratulating this year's semifinalists for Teacher of the Year in Baltimore City Public Schools. We received more than 400 nominations this year, and I'm proud to recognize our 10 semifinalists. They are Adrian Canal, a pre-K teacher at Govins Elementary School, Tonette Campbell, English and African American Studies teacher at the Academy for College and Career Exploration, ACE. Caitlin Fink, gifted and advanced learning teacher from pre-kindergarten to grade 2 at Hollabird Academy. Phoebus Limiak, pre-kindergarten teacher at Hamden Elementary Middle School. My glasses. Jevons Liu, mathematics and special education teacher at the Academy for College and Career Exploration. Franca Muller-Paz, International Baccalaureate Spanish teacher at Baltimore City College. Sheridian Pratt, math and science teacher at the historic Cherry Hill Elementary Middle School. Megan Smith, kindergarten teacher at Mary Ann Winterling Elementary School at Bentaloo. Leah Thabage, Theberge, sorry, middle school social studies teacher at Falstaff Elementary Middle School, and LaQuinia Winder, kindergarten teacher at Cecil Elementary School. One of these highly talented educators will succeed Catlock Jones and compete for the title of Maryland Teacher of the Year. Now, these 10 semifinalists are in good company because in the past 10 years, 5 city schools Teachers of the Year have gone on to become the Maryland Teacher of the Year, and that's more than any other district in the state. And 4 more city schools Teachers of the Year were also finalists from Maryland Teacher of the Year. So congratulations to our semifinalists, and special thanks to all city schools teachers for everything you do for our schools and students every day. And now on to some more sobering news. As our board chair, Sally, referenced earlier, I will give more details about a cyber breach that occurred. And as many of you are aware, earlier today, we announced that the district had suffered a data breach in February. Bad actors broke into our computer network. We immediately notified law enforcement, conducted an initial investigation, and secured our operational systems. Following a thorough investigation with the guidance of law enforcement and external cybersecurity experts, we confirmed that certain documents may have been compromised, which contained information belonging to some current, former, and prospective employees, as well as to volunteers and contractors. This also impacted files that were related to less than 1.5% of all of our students, which is approximately 1,000 students out of our total population of about 75,000. Since then, we have been investigating with the help of external cybersecurity experts to determine who was impacted and what data was compromised. Now, these are the actions that we are taking to help impacted individuals based on the work that's occurred over the last 8 weeks. Starting today, we are sending notification letters to impacted individuals by U.S. mail. We will also post a general message on our website, note it on social media, and notify staff. It is important that you read and keep your individual notice. And even the CEO, but since I'm one of the ones impacted, is going to have to make sure that this letter does not go on the piano under a pile with stacks of magazines, like often happens with my mail. This is one, it's going to be important for all of us to make sure that we keep, and because it's going to provide more details on what was included, as well as the steps to protect yourself. We are going to be providing impacted individuals with complimentary access to credit monitoring services, such as identity theft protection and monitoring of dark web and address changes to help mitigate any potential for harm. We are also establishing a call center to answer questions and help impacted individuals enroll in mitigation services. Since this incident, we have implemented a series of additional cybersecurity enhancements, including installing endpoint detection and response software and resetting all users' passwords. We take this matter incredibly seriously. We will continue to assess our procedures already in place, as well as the results of the forensic audit for ways to defend against evolving cybersecurity threats. City schools does not exist in a vacuum. There are many government agencies that have been targets for this kind of bad actor. So we, again, exist in that space, but we are committed to making sure that we support our team members, our employees, students, and anyone else who was impacted. And then finally, because I do want to end on a positive note, I know that it's hard, again, and I, along with many of you, are part of the impacted. So I know that it's difficult to really process what that might mean, but I would like to end, Chair, my comments for this evening on a positive note. If we could cue up a couple of the pictures, if possible, from my visit this morning to Reach High School. It was a fabulous visit, and it was a reminder of why we do the work under the leadership of Dr. Gresham. I will tell you that, thank you, that this was a wonderful opportunity to meet the teachers, the staff, the mentors, the folks on the ground every day who are contributing to the increases that we are seeing in Reach's data. There is always a story behind the numbers. I had a chance to even eat at the Reach Cafe. I met with both Ms. Fazio and Ms. Hurd, two leaders who are responsible for a lot of the gains. There you see right there, Major Hall. Got a chance to really see the work they are doing behind a lot of the gains that we are seeing in their data. Ms. Hurd and I commiserated because she is the teacher of AP Seminar, and I am the mother of a city school student who is in AP Seminar. So I felt much better after that conversation about, again, some of the challenges that young people can face in there. But as she assured me, our young people are up to the task. They can stretch, they can do this, and you can see it throughout the school. I want to give a shout out to Principal Gresham, who I know will be honored later. Is it next month? Thank you. May 29th at the Heart of the Schools Awards. And I got a chance to really see today why school leaders are the heart of the schools. Reach is a tangibly different place. And it was just a great way to start my day after break right here in the Reach Cafe. These are young people in our life skills program. And Dr. Gresham had the foresight when the school was being built, when he knew he was getting a new building. Oh, I guess it's done. Just kidding. Just kidding. I got the gong. I got the gong, Chair. It's all right, Commissioner Ames Messenger. But what was wonderful is Dr. Gresham in their old building really wanted to give life skills students the opportunity for real world experience, particularly in food preparation and other things. And so when the school was being designed, he worked with architects to make sure that there was actually a cafe space in the new building. So I had a chance to go today. The young people, I was not supposed to be eating bacon today. But because they had what I hear are some of the best BLTs in city schools, I got to have one complimentary. Dr. Gresham covered my cost. And it was, in fact, one of the best BLT sandwiches I've had. But I had a chance to talk to the teachers and the team, and they talked about how all of our young people deserve these real world opportunities. So I just wanted to take, in the middle of what I know is sobering news, just to take a pause and let us know that the work that we are doing in city schools matters for young people every day. And it is the work of the educators, school leaders, staff members at schools, and those in Central who support them. That really are making the difference. So thanks to the Reach community for the wonderful tour and warm welcome. And I will turn it back to you, Chair Sally.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This brings us to a meatier portion of our evening this evening that I know a lot of folks are waiting to talk a little bit about. So I'd like to welcome up Angela Alvarez from the Office of New Initiatives around new charter and other school application as an informational update. And as the Office of New Initiative gets set up this evening, I just want to make sure our public is aware. So what you'll see in tonight's presentation will lay out what our timeline is, as well as who has expressed interest to date in this process. And so we're hoping that this information provides more clarity on the process and more information to come.
Okay, thank you for your patience. Sorry about that. I'm Angela Alvarez. I'm the Senior Executive Director for the Office of New Initiatives. Good evening, Board of School Commissioners.
And good evening. I'm Kendra Banks, and I'm the manager in the Office of New Initiatives. Okay, this evening we will be presenting the new applicants for charter schools and operators, and the work that we are working on aligns with the board priorities 5, 6, and 7. Where we provide equal access to district services, resources, and facilities to ensure that success of students, staff, and the surrounding community. Priority 6, schools will increase the number of educational programming of all types and levels throughout the city while ensuring that all schools, including charters, guarantee a high-quality educational experience. And then lastly, priority 7, where we continuously work toward equity at all levels by implementing policies, practices, and procedures that create a welcoming and inclusive academic and professional environment. The charter school policy standards, of course, align with the Baltimore City School Board of Commissioners, where you all actively seek and support the development of public charter schools that provide high quality learning opportunities to the students of Baltimore City. We expect higher levels of individual school accountability in exchange for the autonomy and flexibility, and expect public charter schools to use the autonomy and flexibility afforded to them as a means of developing instructional and operational strategies that accelerate improvement in student achievement and school excellence. So our process and overview include the following dates. In January, the 21st and the 29th included technical assistance that was offered to organizations that want to submit an application. And applicants are advised to attend a session at least a year before planning to apply. February 3rd, the letter of intent was due. March 6th, applications were due by 12 noon. And the applications that were submitted on that date are being considered for the school year of 26-27. And Baltimore City will review and render a decision on each applicant within 120 days of receipt of the application in accordance to the procedures adopted by our district. March 11th, we completed the technical review, which includes reviewing all applications to make sure that the sections are complete and the required documentation has been submitted. And April 22nd, which is today, we're presenting the new applications to the board for informational purposes. Next slide. The week of May 5th, our final preliminary strengths and weaknesses report will be shared with the applicants. May 15th, our applicants will have the opportunity to present to the Board of School Commissioners at a public work session. And this is the opportunity for applicants to make their case for approval, take questions from the board, and address any areas of weakness. And at this time, this is where the public can also provide testimony or any information they want to share.
Through the applicant. So for these application processes,
Applicants can collect feedback that can be in the written form. People can also send letters to the board. And so the testimony that night is organized by each applicant themselves. So they bring up who they want to speak on their behalf, and then take questions from the board. And so because these have legal process and legal requirements, we can't have people signing up as part of public comment because that's uneven, unexpected, and so it creates inconsistencies between applicants. So that's why the person who signed up for public comment tonight, because it was about an application, was not able to do that because that's not allowed in the process.
And on May 21st, the applicant may submit additional information to the board to address any concerns raised during the work session, and June 10th is the big day for the board vote. Who participates in the application review? Well, first we have the Charter and Operator-led School Advisory Board, which includes our internal and external stakeholders, and they advise the CEO on issues related to charters and operator-led schools and provides advice on the applications to the CEO. Of course, we have our wonderful CEO who determines the official recommendation for the board. And the CEO finals recommendation to the Board of School Commissioners is based on a comprehensive review of the application input from the advisory board, applicant testimony at the work session, and any supplemental information requested and provided during that process. And lastly, we have our great school board, and you will have the final and ultimate deciding authority and makes the final decision based on a review of the applications, extent to which application meets the board's priorities, applicant's testimony at the work session, any supplemental information provided by the applicant, and the CEO's recommendation. So first, we have our applicant, Charm City Garden Montessori, CCGMS. The organization is Charm City Garden Montessori School. They are proposing to open a new charter focused in environmental education in the area of West Baltimore. The target grades are 9th through 12th, and they'll be serving about 225 students. Their programming will provide a nature-based Montessori high school experience that integrates environmental education, rigorous academics and community service, as well as student-centered learning. It'll be rooted in Montessori philosophy and foster collective responsibility in environmental stewardship, emphasizing problem-based learning, interdisciplinary studies, and 21st century skills such as critical thinking, collaborative, and creativity in their academic programming. Second, we have the Dream Academy. Proposed by Arts for Learning Maryland. They are proposing a conversion of Thomas Jefferson Elementary Middle School number 232, focused in the area of arts integration in the Huntington Ridge neighborhood in West Baltimore, serving grades pre-K through 8th. Their programming will foster an equitable, joyful, and innovative learning community where arts and artist integration transform teaching and learning. And through co-teaching by educators and artists, students will build a strong understanding of both academic and arts content. And this approach supports academic achievement, social emotional development, increased engagement, and empowers students to pursue their creative and personal goals. The applicant is seeking a school name change and naming the library for Portia LaVon Stokes Williams. Next slide. Lastly, we have a proposal from the Juvenile Aftercare Incorporated organization. The school name is to be determined. Their focus area is continuing education and vocational training. Located in East Baltimore, targeting grades 8th through 12th. Their programming supports young people re-entering the community by providing individualized academic and intervention services that promote educational advancement, addresses the effects of maltreatment, and improves cognitive and social behaviors. The mission is to seek partnerships and funding to establish an educational facility offering continuing education, vocational training, job readiness programs, and social services for young people and emerging adults that are transitioning from the juvenile justice system. If they are approved, they would like to seek MSD approval to eventually add boarding as an option to their program.
They're applying as a contract school because it's a specified population they're seeking to serve. And that's so this kicks off, this meeting just officially kicks off that we're in the process for members of the public of reviewing the applicants. Folks can read a summary of their programs online on our website. The next meeting on the 15th is when you'll be able to hear, and members of the public will be able to hear, it's open to members of the public, directly from the applicants and the people they identify to speak on their behalf on that night.
So I just want to open this up to my board colleagues for any specific questions around the process, not on the applications itself this evening. So if any board colleagues have any questions, Commissioner Coy?
Yeah, can you remind both, I guess, the board and the community when the last time was that we had new charter applications coming before the board? Because it's been a while.
It's been a couple of years. It's been slow. I will say, like, since 21, 22, we had some applications come through. So that was a few years ago. But prior to COVID, we had about 3 to 5 applications every year. And so obviously soon after COVID, we had a couple in 21, 22. And now this again is, now we have 3. So we feel like we're starting to get back into a regular cadence. So it has been a minute before we've brought have applicants. And so we're excited about that. And again, we start in conversations with people a year before they apply. So we know we'll have a number of applicants for next year because folks have already begun doing the pre-work.
Excellent. Vice Chair Parker?
Please forgive me if I missed it. Were they only 3 or were the 3 that are going to continue in the process?
There's only 3.
Okay.
Everyone that applies, unless they withdraw themselves, will go through the full process
Okay.
per MSDE guidelines.
Commissioner Reagan-Lollinger?
Thank you. And then when does the board receive the full applications submitted?
Yep, so the board will receive those this week now that we've opened that process. And from there, you'll get the preliminary recommendations on a similar timeline as the applicants. So we've just begun. We haven't, one of the first steps for applicants, just for members of the public, is to do an interview with the advisory board. That has not happened yet. That's actually happening this week. So we're still pretty early in the process.
Commissioner Esposito and then Commissioner Slater-Harrington?
I just have a question about the contract school. If it's pending MSDE's approval for the boarding piece, like how is that weighted when going through the process of determining whether or not a recommendation is made?
We're going to review their proposal as having a normal school day, normal school hours. What they're indicating is they would eventually like to be a boarding school. So, if approved, applicants can request additional waivers later. We have like multiple cycles and of the state in the process. And most waivers will look at for schools that are approved in that initial planning year. We'll work through that because the first thing is the application itself strong enough to go forward, and then we work on details that need a different review.
And the lens that y'all will be looking at it, is it from whether or not, like because it's new, like is it whether or not they would be able to manage it, or is it whether or not it could be successful? And the reason why I'm asking this is if that boarding piece is important to exist in order for the school to have good outcomes and be successful. I guess I'm just kind of processing that.
They've submitted a proposal that they're asking us to consider them using standard hours. Our but our reading of the law is like that only MSDE, like within the law, our board has authority to approve schools that have hours similar to other public schools. We don't operate boarding schools, so that we feel like MSDE would have to approve that as a request. So that would be a later, the first hurdle is like, do we approve them as a school? And I don't think they would be ready to start off. That's something they want to grow into. That's the eventual thing. So they're not proposing in year one to be a boarding school, to be clear. But that's a goal they have for the future if they're approved, that they're being clear with us that that's their ultimate goal.
Thank you, Chair. Can you give me some line of sight into what I might expect with the application? Will there be financial documents or any kind of narrative that would suggest sustainability for the school, given what we just went through with improving portfolio of schools that, you know, had sustainability issues? I want to make sure that we're collecting that information on the front end, as I'm sure you are. But if you can give me some line of sight into what will we see with this application?
Yeah, so you'll see the full, everything they submit to us, you will see. So you'll see their full application. An application has 4 kind of sections, one around academics, another around culture, another around operations, another around finances. So within their finances, you'll see like their proposed budget and if they've identified additional sources of funding. You'll see whether or not they have letters of commitment for those sources of funding, or approved grants or things like that for those sources of funding within the application. You'll see their school size. Obviously, you'll get, once we have done the full review, meaning we've had the interview, we've had, they'll have some opportunity from the interview to submit additional documents. Or some schools that we, based on the initial review of the application with the advisory board, have some questions about the application, but you'll get within the preliminary recommendations report that they receive, you'll get where we see questions around, like if there's questions around sustainability, additional things where we have concerns, and they'll be able to speak to you directly about any areas of concern when we do the work session together.
Parallel to that, or aligned with that, is community support. Are letters of support included in that application that would signify that this will be long-term sustainable and is what community wants?
Absolutely. So you will see the evidence of support that schools have collected. So that can be letters. They've all done it in different ways. It's usually a combination. So you'll see some letters, you'll see petitions of support, and they may have, it's up to them who they, again, bring up to speak with you. But some people may have some of those supporters speak some of that time, or just like today, have some presence to give you a sense of that there's support behind them.
Yeah, I get the impression that there is some community support.
Additional questions from our board colleagues this evening? Oh, yes, Commissioner Mohammed.
So for the sake of the public, as going through the process a little while ago with charters, can you speak towards the due diligence that your office generally takes working with the CEO to come up with a recommendation that comes to the board? Can you give us some insight into that? And then can you also give us some insight into the operator advisory board and the work that they do that helps to further that recommendation that comes to us?
So it starts with a technical review that our office does. So that's like the first leg, and we let people know if there's any kind of issue with that. We let you know if there's issues with the technical review. So that's the first sort of beginning part. There is a full and it's public rubric for every question, and it's extensive. It's larger than we just went through renewal. So new school applications are significantly a larger application than the renewal application for schools, because it's about what is everything that you're trying to do and who are the people. And so there's a detailed review of that. we have a internal external stakeholder group called the New and Operator-Led Schools Advisory Board that is made up of organizations whose role is to provide advice to the CEO on matters related to operator schools. And so that includes organizations such as the Y of Central Maryland, Maryland Disability Rights, Catholic Charities, the Maryland Alliance of Public Charter Schools sits on there. We have operators that participate in the process, and a number of other organizations, as well as staff from city schools. So academics plays a role, our finance team plays a role, our schools office plays a role in the review of the applications along with our office, and they also play a role in the interview. So the application we're looking at, is there a good plan here? Is it sound? Based on what they provided, do we think there's the capacity to lift this? Do they have the financial, does their budget make sense? Do their numbers make sense? Are they meeting a critical district need? I think that's another kind of key thing. Do we need this school? The interview lets us know like a bit if there's questions we had in reading the app, and about like the people. Do the people have the capacity? That's a mixture of looking at, they submit their own resumes like of the founding board and background about the founding board, and we'll ask them questions to get at the capacity of the founding board and understanding who is responsible for writing the application, because people can have people help them with the application who are not going to run the school. So those are things that we try to get an understanding of in proposing schools. Is a serious thing, and we're thankful to have people that are interested in serving our students in this way. But we want to make sure that if we recommend someone, that they're going to run a strong school, because students don't get those years when people are learning back. So it's a thing we take seriously, and we are thankful that in Maryland and in Baltimore, we've been lucky to have people apply and move forward who are very serious about students, which is not what you see in other states where the laws are a little different.
No, I appreciate the insight. I'll echo what you said with regards to the seriousness. And I asked this question for the sake of the public because I want everyone to be aware of the lengths that your office takes along with the CEO and the staff to assure that the operators that come to us are serious about our children. This is very important to us, so I want to thank you for your work, and this is a heavy lift for your operators. So thank you for your interest and your work that goes into the application process.
Commissioner Coy?
Can you give some insight into the typical range of recommendation from the CEO, like what we are as a board anticipating hearing, and then the typical range of what the board may vote on for a given a proposed new school?
Yeah, so this is not like renewal where there's all these terms. The initial term for a school that's recommended to go forward is a 5-year term. That's the initial contract term everybody starts out with. And so you're going to get either we recommend that you open this school, or we don't. And here's the strengths, here are the weaknesses, here's how they meet the board priorities, or how they meet district needs. So that's basically what you will see. Within the state of Maryland, we need to ensure that people have the capacity to ready a facility, and they have a reasonable plan for acquiring a facility, but they don't have to, at the point where you're voting, have the facility in hand. So there could be a component about ensuring you have your facility, right, as an additional kind of approval process. But that's the only kind of special kind of caveat, if you think.
So just to recap, the recommendation from the CEO will be either in favor of the application or against, and it's for 5 years. And the board vote is approve conditionally upon facilities being secured, or not approve. Is that just to like really outline it there?
Yep, that's correct.
Thank you.
Additional questions or comments from the board this evening? Okay. want to move into a subsequent presentation. I actually would like for you to stay and move into the review of operational renewal process. I think this is really also critically important for our potential and prospective charter applicants to understand the process that charter schools will go through eventually, and the types of information the board may consider at this juncture of the process. And I want to thank our entire stakeholder group who's come this evening out in support. This may be helpful for new charter applicants to hear this information that is contained tonight.
Very good.
That's the key.
I agree with that because we definitely, within the new school application, ask people, how are you going to make sure you're successful for renewal? So I love that you said that.
This is an area that we get a lot of questions and comments on, so to make sure it's really, really clear to our stakeholders.
And for the record, again, I'm Angela Alvarez, the Senior Executive Director of the Office of New Initiatives.
And good evening, everyone. I'm Teresa Jones, Chief Achievement and Accountability Officer for the district.
All right, this renewal presentation most closely aligns to Board Priority 6, which is around ensuring that we have high quality educational opportunities for our students, for all of our schools, and that we're increasing in the quality. So we are going to present the final process for schools who will be coming to the board for renewal next year, in school year 25-26. Prior to bringing this process forward, we every year do a debriefing process. That has been embedded in the process since we created this process in 2012 with our stakeholders. And so we're always trying to balance making small adjustments that are necessary or help to improve the way that we're looking at schools, which are very complex, with maintaining a level of consistency. And I would say the measures themselves have been pretty consistent since that time. There may have been slight changes to methodology, or we've had changes in state assessments. Based on this year's debriefing process, we have decided to make no changes to this year's process from the prior process that the board just went through, and to do some further conversations with schools this summer for the following year. So the renewal process occurs for schools every 3, 5, or 8 years. It starts in their penultimate year of their contract. We have for a long time recognized that schools are complex places. And so unlike other places in the country that are just starting to do this, we've always had a process that's both qualitative and quantitative and includes site visits. And so those 3 components, I think, have led us to have a very strong renewal process that really gives and sheds a lot of insight on what's happening with our schools, and has helped the board make, I think, the right decisions in terms of renewing or non-renewing operators. There are 3 kind of key components that we look at that's outlined in our board's policy: student achievement and academic success, school climate, financial management and governance. For the schools that are beginning the renewal process, there are 7 that are up for this upcoming year. And so some components of them always sort of start even before we do this meeting, which are consistent components. That's the site visits have begun, and the 5 essentials survey. Schools will be getting their data tables in the summer. They'll turn in their renewal applications in early September. They'll go through a review with that same body I just shared on the other presentation. Our Charter and Upper Schools Advisory Board will review those applications and make recommendations to the CEO in a similar fashion. Schools will get their preliminary recommendations the week of November 3rd. And then we're anticipating it'll go to the board on that first meeting for information kicking off that process in terms of the public. We'll have a work session in December and that the board will vote in the first meeting in January. These are the schools that are up for renewal. I'm just going to leave it up for a second just so people can see their names. Okay. So this is just showing the overall measures that we look at in the academic section of renewal. We have not, so Chief Jones is going to talk about it, but we have not had a trend measure in some time. We are still doing some conversations with schools, so we're going to wait. The reason why we haven't had trend, just so we're clear for everyone, is just because we started a new state assessment and you need a certain number of years to be able to look at that kind of change. And so that's the reason why, but that's always been a part of the process, but it is time dependent on assessments. And so you can see there are a number of measures in renewal. In fact, I want to say there are 18 total measures in the renewal process. But I'm going to turn it over to Chief Jones, who's going to actually walk through what each of these things mean.
Great. Okay, so good evening again, everyone. So the first set of measures that we're going to discuss are actually comprised of results from the state assessments. So the first one is what we refer to as our absolute measure. And the absolute performance measure is intended to be able to get a sense of the school's most recent year of performance on the state assessment. One of the things that we have noted is that because there was a change in the state assessment, we had to take a look at the characteristics of the underlying data to determine which approach to using that data would be most meaningful for purposes of this process. Based on the characteristics of the data, we've been using the average performance level as one of the ways to understand school level performance. So what you'll see noted here is that the way we're using it actually gets translated into one of the 4 ratings, from not effective to highly effective. But because we tend to see a correlation between poverty and absolute performance, we've actually adopted a methodology whereby we take a look at poverty groupings of schools to be able to determine whether or not a school is more or less, serving its students, equal or better than schools with similar levels of poverty. So that is one of the key ways that we have modified this particular measure. As Angela described earlier, the way we're looking to approach it for school year 25-26 is exactly the same as what we've been doing for the last year. Next slide. The second measure, and this is the one that Angela mentioned that we would not be using in school year 25-26, is the trend performance measure. So we won't spend a ton of time tonight referring to like the different ways we've been looking at it. What I will note though, is because we do now have multiple years of the data, we do want to be able to consider thoughtful ways of bringing that measure back. The intent behind having a trend measure is it gives you sort of a sense of how that school is doing over a period of time, which of course gives us a little bit of a different view than just looking at the 1 year, which we just discussed with the absolute performance measure. The third is around growth. And we all know that student growth is really important. And so one of the ways that we've taken a look at this is to be able to use the student growth percentiles, which give us a sense around how students are performing relative to their peers. And we're fortunate here in Maryland that we actually have this data based on state level performance. So it is a really robust way for us to take a look at how students are performing and how they're growing from 1 year to the next. Because it does require 2 consecutive years of data. It is a measure that is used for our elementary and middle schools. It's not used for our high schools. And one of the things that you'll see noted here is essentially how we translate that performance into one of the 4 different rating categories. And so what you'll see here is it is broken down by taking a look at the percentile of performance relative to the group of schools based on their grade bands. The other thing that I'll note before we leave this is that one of the things that we've also afforded schools an option for is to be able to use an alternative assessment, such as the NWEA MAP assessment, for example, in lieu of MCAP, because we have the ability to actually take a look at peer level data performance because of the national data sets that are available through NWEA. So schools, again, have that as an option, and they notify us of that later in the process.
Next is the fidelity to charter. Adley. Oh, no, this is still you. Sorry. This was you. That's me. Okay. Fidelity charter application overall. This is a qualitative measure. And so it looks at the school's application. School submitted an application that has a number of questions. And so we're looking at evidence the school provides in that application. And then we're considering, you know, are you actually delivering on the mission and vision that you indicated you would to the board? Are you using data to drive student performance? Is the curriculum kind of furthering that mission and student achievement at the same time? Are you creating a positive environment for students and families within the school? Are you using effective strategies to address challenges that arise in student performance, enrollment, student attendance, dropout rates, attrition, and or choice? And do you have a clear and comprehensive plan around professional learning connected to that moving student achievement? The other measure that is qualitative that's in this section is the effective programming for all racial and ethnic groups. For schools that have a certain percentage of population of diversity, we're looking to make sure that schools are providing high quality programming across each student group, that it understands its data for each student group, and that they're using a myriad of instructional approaches aligned to best practice and research to improve outcomes for student achievement groups. And that includes ensuring you have high quality curriculum materials, that students are having access to rigorous courses and rigorous instruction within their courses, that students, the experiences of the school promote students' sense of themselves and their ability to accomplish, to have accomplishments and success within school, and that the school has evidence-based practices to reduce gaps where they appear, and that the median SGP of the lowest proficiency student group is outperforming the district median SGP, as well as how it compares to that of other students within the school.
The next area is around college and career readiness, and this is actually comprised of sort of three subcomponents: participation, success, and college enrollment. You'll see the details noted here, but what I'll call out is that this was designed to align to how MSDE looks at college and career readiness. One of the things that we do when we take a look at participation is we do focus on diploma track 12th graders who have taken SAT, ACT, AP, or IB exams, so on and so forth. The key thing to note here is that we are giving students credit if it's any one of those. So it does become an opportunity for schools to capture as many students as possible, depending on which offerings they make available. Similarly, for the success measure, you'll see that represents the majority of the weight in this particular category. So you'll see some standards listed there around what that threshold of success includes. And then when it comes to college enrollment, we have access to a data set that gives us an understanding around student enrollment in a post-secondary institution within 16 months of high school graduation. So it's kind of intended to be sort of a post-secondary measure of sorts, to help us understand college enrollment. And so this is another one of the key components of our process. Next slide, please. Also, when it comes to success, we take a look at graduation rate. So one of the things we often talk about is the 4-year adjusted cohort graduation rate. Again, here we focus on the diploma track students. So that is really what we do, sort of as a slight modification of what you'll see as the state's reported graduation rate. And so the idea here is that we are taking a look at data over 3 years. So it gives us a sense around what that average rate is. And then we've established cut points based on that graduation rate. So you'll see that ranging from if they're less than 71% being rated as not effective to if they have a rate of 90% or better, they're rated highly effective. The next area that we're going to talk a bit about is the 5 Essentials survey. You hear us often refer to this survey because of its strong research basis. What it tells us is it gives us an understanding around how well schools are prepared to actually demonstrate school improvement in a variety of success measures. This has been proven out through research over decades now. It has been a key contributor to our understanding around levels of readiness of our schools. So for this particular survey, it is administered to our students as well as our instructional staff. We are then able to look at the data across the 5 Essentials The research does indeed show that for schools that are rated strong on at least 3 of the 5 essentials, they are considered to be 10 times more likely to show substantial gains when it comes to school improvement. So it is one of the key reasons that we've included it in our process. You'll just see an example on the right around how the data is depicted. It gives us that range from very weak up to being very strong, and then we factor that into the ratings that are assigned for the survey. So next up, we're going to talk a bit about school climate. So as Angela pointed out earlier, we recognize the complexity of schools. And so one of the ways that we factor that in is by taking a look at a number of various climate measures that also contribute to our understanding around the school's ability to serve our students. So what you'll see here is we're going to walk through a variety of measures. First, I want to just make note, we do have an SER, the School Effectiveness Review. It is a site-based review that gives us an understanding around talented people, vision and engagement, highly effective instruction. One of the things that we're going to talk about, and this I'll turn to Angela for, is we're going to do a little bit of a pilot this year to understand if there's ways that we can actually use that site visit to get a better understanding around how well schools are supporting the needs of students with disabilities. However, it is a process that factors in classroom observations, focus groups, interviews, document review. And so that process has already started for this current year. And then that data gets used in a variety of ways. We also look at survey data, cohort retention, the other measures that you'll see here that we'll walk through one at a time. So when it comes to the school effectiveness review, I sort of outlined this earlier in terms of the domains. The key thing that I'll just highlight once again here is it is a 2.5-day site visit. So we have the support of SchoolWorks, who has really strong performance and knowledge in this area that is actually helping us conduct these site visits. And then that data is then used to review performance in these various areas using our renewal rubric. Next slide. The family survey, if you'll recall on the prior slide, there was a reference to family satisfaction. One of the ways that we get at that is by looking at family survey data. We also get a sense of that through cohort retention. So the idea being that we want to understand if students are still being retained at a school, still going to that same school 2 years after they originally entered, based on the normal entry grade for that particular school. What we do there is then we average that over the course of 5 years or as many years as possible, and then we assign it a rating based on their percentile in comparison to their other grade bands. Similarly, for the family survey, we also take a look at up to 5 years of data. One of the key differences here, though, is that we do have specific cut points that we use that determine which of the 4 ratings is assigned based on the family survey results.
Just one slight correction, you just misspoke a little bit. For cohort retention, we're comparing them to other schools based on grade band.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I thought I said that. Okay. Go ahead. Was there a question? Yes. Yes. Well, it's not the whole time. It's based on so each school for the most part has sort of what would be the typical entry grade. So if you're a middle grade serving school, 6th grade, for example, would often be that typical grade. So then we'd be saying like, well, how many of those that started in 6th grade are still there 2 years later as 8th graders? So it gives us a sense, like you said, of are they sustaining the enrollment for those students, but it's not technically like, are they all sticking with you for the entire period? A little more nuanced than that. But perfect. And thank you, Angela. I did want to make sure that that was clear. So for that first measure for cohort retention, we do make the note in terms of the comparisons versus grade band. One of the things that we try to do throughout this process is where it's helpful for us is to actually have a relevant peer group for comparison. Because again, we recognize that sometimes the conditions of Baltimore may be different than what we might experience if we just did everything based on a national or a state comparison. So we are very thoughtful about which measures use which specific approach. For cohort retention, that is one that we are specific to our grade bands within Baltimore City. Absolutely. All right, and then our next couple measures here, also within the climate area, take a look at chronic absence and suspensions. One of the things that I will note that's really important to consider here is that, of course, we do have quantitative data that supports an understanding of this, but these are intended to be qualitative measures for this process. So both for chronic absence as well as for suspensions, we're taking a look at not just the data itself, but we're also looking at how the school's application speaks to their level of awareness of their data, the strategies that they're using, if they are able to have good success in those areas, like understanding what that means. And then if they're having challenges, to what extent do they really understand the root causes of those challenges, and are they implementing the strategies that are demonstrating a level of improvement? So those are the key ways that we take a look at these two measures, and you'll see the specific descriptions for each of them of the two noted there on the slide.
Next is how we look at our effective programming for our students with disabilities within the school climate section. Again, here this is a mixed measure. So we're looking at data, evidence the school provides in this application, evidence we know, have they had any complaints, have they had any concerns, and then we're also looking at the disaggregated data for the student population. So what their assessment results look like, what does their attendance look like, what does suspensions look like for this student group, as well as the evidence of what the school's practices are. It also includes a school compliance review that staff that support our students with disabilities from the district office performs for those schools in accordance to MSDE guidelines. And basically, we're trying to see, again, is the school aware of its data and its responsibilities? Are they showing a high level of programming for those students? Are they growing student performance over time? And then are they showing that they have appropriate processes, interventions, and strategies to support the student population within their school? And when there are shortcomings, are they responsive? If they're addressing it, what's their plan around it? So those are the sorts of things that we generally look at in this measure. What we are going to pilot, what we're in the process of piloting this year, is adding to the SER a new domain, the service and support of students with disabilities, with the two key actions. We're looking at how general educators and special educators collaborate to collect and review risk indicator data for those students, as well as how the school monitors its progress and creates plans to support students and to ensure implementation of targeted supports for the students with disabilities. We're piloting it this year, so which means the results from this pilot will not be included in the renewal process for the 25-26. In fact, we've asked SchoolWorks to not give us the report until after the renewal process has concluded, so that we're not being biased by knowing what the report says. So it'll be blind for us and the schools, but they'll go through the process. It will be collected. A report will be written for this at the same time as the other measures, but it won't be released to us nor schools until late January after the board has voted. We will be having schools. One of the things SchoolWorks does at the conclusion of the site visit is they do a survey about the experience of the process. So we're going to ask those questions while it's fresh. And then from that, take the findings of the report and how schools experience that to consider for the 26-27 process. And so if we move forward using it, assuming the pilot goes well and it was helpful, it would make this domain would be considered as part of this measure. So it would have three components, basically. This compliance visit, which is looking at, like, are you following the law kind of things, the evidence in the application, and then this more qualitative review of, like, instructional practices, how teachers are collaborating, that would come from the SER. And so, again, we will be blind to that for this upcoming renewal, but we'll look to discuss it more in the debriefing and that for potential for 26-27. And then the last section is financial management and governance. And so this is where we really look at how a school is in terms of fiscal sustainability, as well as are they, implementing and following key federal, state, and district requirements. There's a component of the SER that's considered here, which is looking at leadership. So, the first review is conducted by our finance office, and it's a review of those audits and making sure there's not any kind of fiscal concerns that come up from that. It may prompt us asking more questions of schools based on that fiscal review. The strategic leadership and governance comes from the SER, so examining how the school leadership creates, defines effective learning for within the school. And that includes like how do they support staff, how do they evaluate staff, and particularly staff in leadership positions like the principal and that executive director or president, whatever the role is of the person who manages the for the organization. Then operator capacity is reviewed by my office. And so we're looking at, have they consistently demonstrated meeting their obligations? Has there been any concern, particularly in issues that create risk for the district or put students at risk in some way? So are they, we look at, have they gotten any notices from us? So one of the things my office and other departments can do is issue notices if a school's not compliant in areas that could be a concern. So for example, if you were doing illegal suspensions, that would be an issue for us. You would get a notice about that because students are not getting due process. If you were doing something like that, that could come up. Are you managing your grants? So we work with the grants office. Like, these are grants that come from the federal government and states. Are you complying with that? Are you spending your grant? Are students being able to access it? Have you created any issues that would put us at risk in terms of an audit from a grant perspective? And have there been any kind of other issues? And so that is everything. And yeah, there's 19 measures in here. We had proposed during the debriefing a change to like about 5 of those. We heard very strongly from schools that they didn't want any big change this year. So we're delaying that, and that'll give us an opportunity to do some more follow-up with them on the areas we began a conversation around this summer for the 26-27 process. I think will put us on a cadence where we're a year ahead of changes, which I think is a good thing. So
Invite any of our board colleagues who have questions this evening. Commissioner Redding-Lollinger and Commissioner Coy. Commissioner Ames Messenger.
Sure. First, thank you for the presentation. And you ended where I was going to pick up, which is you got feedback the last go round and you listened to it and you implemented it. So I know that's much appreciated by folks who I think were, at least in my case, I was applauding the innovation and the desire for change, but wanted to, not necessarily do it immediately because it might feel rushed for folks on the other end. But I want to pick it up there, and I'm curious. One thing I really like about what you did with the inclusion, special education in the SER in the pilot is that you are actually collecting the data. You're not including it as part of the process, but you're going to look at it afterward. And I guess I'm curious, you propose some really interesting things, interesting changes like performance over time, changes to the cohort graduation rate. I think it would be really instructive for the board to understand how those changes might hit if you're going to propose them for next year, if there was something similar. So are you thinking about perhaps providing us with the data that we would have gotten had those changes gone into effect maybe after the review, so that we can A, better understand them? Some of them were a little bit complicated, but B, so we could see, well, this might have changed an outcome for a particular school or not. Is any of that in the works?
So I'll start, and then Teresa, Chief Jones will take over. I think it's important this year, and normally we do it. I don't know why we didn't do it this year. The importance of examples, I think, is really important. We try to look at it in a blind way. Like we want to make changes that are helping us understand schools in a better way. And so not be influenced by what that means for specific schools. And so we'll often maybe look at like a traditional schools, right? Because we want to make sure the measure is appropriate and is helping us understand what we're trying to understand about schools. And I think, so that like is the key thing. So we don't say to schools, well, like, and you look better in this. Like, I don't think we should be making a decision based on that. We should be making a decision based on what's helping us to have a better understanding of schools. I will say though, even with that, what we're proposing, we think is helpful to schools because it's legitimate to be, it helps us understand work that's really complex and how making sure that we're considering all the factors, like grad rate is a good example. That there's a lot of complexity in how to improve that over time. And right now, how we look at it, we don't give you any credit for improving. And so you can have a school that increased by 10 points. That's a huge to move a grad rate by 10 points is not something you do overnight. There is a lot that went into that. Right now, if your average is below that number, doesn't matter that you improve that much. And like, I think those things should matter, but we need to do some more engagement with schools to help them understand.
Yeah, so I would just build on that in two ways. So one, we're trying to do this in a way that like we have the analysis that helps us understand. So like, what does this mean for like a representative school? But we're also trying to be mindful of like the sensitivities around the different contexts for different schools. So even using Angela's example around graduation rate, yes, for a large school to have that kind of an increase, that's pretty significant. But if you have a small number of students, it could be misleading just to look at that increase because it could be just a function of the class because it was a smaller number of students. So sometimes the measures don't fully account for some of those nuances. And so that's part of what we're attempting to do is to make sure as we do the analysis, we're factoring that in. We want to be able to bring the information and the learning from that forward in a way that doesn't create confusion or compromise the integrity of the process. So that is one of the things we do want to be careful about because we don't want to be in a situation where it creates a possibility that anyone could think they can cherry pick which scenario works better for them and everybody gets the benefit of take the one that works, that's better for you. That really doesn't always serve us well. And so I think to your point, Commissioner, we want to be able to bring forward some learning so that the board has the benefit of as much net analysis as possible, but do it in a way that allows us to really think about what does it mean for the portfolio of schools, if you will, versus specific schools, if that makes sense.
It does. And a way to do that, it doesn't even need to be of the, schools that are going through renewal, but giving us a sense for if we apply this graduation rate, this is the percentage of schools that would be considered effective versus under the old metric for our whole portfolio. Right. But I just want a sense for what the impact might be before we decide we should adopt this or not. And the other thing I would say is because you heard from charters that they wanted a bit of a heads up, maybe in a more official capacity saying, these are the things we are considering for next year, right? So that they do have a heads up. So if you do decide to go forward with changes next year, it doesn't feel out of the blue or feel rushed.
Fair points.
Yeah, and I think the delay here actually puts us on that timeline. It was something that was not possible. It's possible because we also didn't make changes last year. And so it put us in a different cadence around the renewal that allows for space, which was something we didn't kind of have the luxury of before. And so, we've tried to be very small around it. And some of these, just to be very transparent, are not new changes that we propose. Like we've talked with schools around grad rate. I think one of the things that is challenging, and I think we have to think about in terms of how we do the debriefing, is that our operator schools are mostly K-8s, K-5s. So it impacts a much smaller group of schools. And so when you're talking to them as a body, that might not matter. It's not mattering as much to that as a large group as it is impact. So I think we're losing some of the voice of our secondary school. So that's one of the things we have to think about. But the beauty of delaying the changes and saying, you know what, actually, we don't have to make these changes. And we can do some more feedback with schools. It gives us that space that you're talking about.
And again, just wanted to again applaud the communication, the listening to feedback. I think it is well received. I have one more small thing, just because it's something else that I've heard, and I want to dig into it a little bit just to understand it better. So on the timeline, applications are due September 4th, 2025. I've heard, and some of this is out of your control, but MSDE gets data back late in the summer sometimes, and sometimes pushes that deadline. Is that deadline in our policy? Is it because we got to get the process kicked off? I mean, do you have the ability to push that back if data comes in late? And lastly, I guess, from my understanding, how important is it if I'm submitting a renewal application for me to have all of that data to really, or is it one of those things where I can actually get most of the application done and it's not, I'm trying to weigh and understand what I've heard about this deadline to understand how critical it actually is that there's some space between getting the data and getting the application in.
The timeline is sort of tight because we're also trying to make sure you have decisions before the choice process. And there are a number of steps that we have to do once we have the data. Between getting the data and you being able to vote, there's a number of things that have to happen in between. But I will say, like, we have pushed that date. That's sort of the ideal. But like, if the data comes back late, we've sometimes just pushed, like we did that last year. We had to push the deadline a little bit, depending on how late. We sometimes have added like an addendum, an ability for schools to submit a response to that data once they got it, to be able to include it. So we have the bulk of the application. Like, schools know what their performance is. So they have access to all the things that we're looking at in renewal. It just may not look the same as in renewal, which, you know, is partly why, like with growth, we consider moving some of these data points, we move to absolute. So like for absolute way of looking at it, sorry, I'm trying to think about, I'm trying to channel you, like how to say this in a public friendly way. Meaning like, a lot of our data points are comparative. And so how you compare, you might not know as much until you see it in a data table. But you are able to, for a measure like grad rate, where it's like, you know, is it 70%? Is it 80%? Like, the measures rated on that, you know that before we even give you a data table. You got, like, you had your data already. And so there are a number of measures that are like that, but there are some where, you know, having comparison, it's helpful. Schools actually get the data, it's embargoed before we're able to release the data table. So they also, like, these are public data, so they could do their own comparisons, but there is some difference in how we look at it versus how other people look at it. I'm not going to say.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the only thing I would add is that we do try to stagger the release so that we can get them as much data as possible as soon as we can. So to your point, when we talk about later releases, it's typically because of the state assessment. So to Angela's point, they may have access to the embargo data. It doesn't present it exactly the same way that we would present it to them. As soon as we get it and we're able to pull it together, we can provide that to them as an addendum. Depending on how, you know, their application has been written, we can also give them another opportunity to then speak to that specific set of data and what that contributes to an understanding around how they're performing. Again, we want all of it to be available as soon as possible, but right now, we have no reason to believe that we won't be able to do it. But again, I don't want to speak for the state, but that is what we're trying to do.
We did get it earlier this year than last year.
Last year.
And so we hope we get it, like, you know, the other assessment, we were at the point where we started getting the data in August. So we should all pray on that. So that we have that as, you know, it's a computerized test, which theoretically, you know, get the data sooner. And so hopefully, but we're trying to be responsive to that, to schools. And I think the other thing I want to say about that too is, like, in terms of how we're rating it, it doesn't matter when you get it. The rating is the rating on that. It is based on what that score says. There's nothing you can do that's going to change the score. What we want to make sure is, in the fidelity to charter, where we're looking at the overall application and what you're doing, you can able to speak to that. But you should already know what you're doing even before you see that data. You should have a sense based on past years where your data, you know, there's not much more really to say because of the data release, if that what I'm saying makes sense.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. One question and two comments. Question is around conditions, seeing the list of schools that are coming up. You know, there's a number that have conditions from before. And my question is, how are you anticipating presenting those conditions for those that had approvals with them. I certainly would love to see a one-to-one comparison of here's the condition and here's the degree to which they met it, which I guess there's some space in sort of the commentary about the recommendation, but it doesn't seem as prominent perhaps or as built into how it's presented to the board for like a one-to-one comparison. So just curious how you're thinking about conditions for the school for schools generally, but having participated in the renewals of a number of these schools 3 years ago, or coming up on 3 years ago, I'm curious to see how you're thinking about that.
I think we did try to do that to be helpful. We can follow up with Dr. Judkins to see if there's a different way you want to see that presented than how we did in the prior renewal. So we tried to make sure especially if the conditions are around data points, this is what it was when they got renewed, this is what it's been since. But if there's different ways that would be more helpful, we can follow up offline to figure out how to do that.
Great, no, that sounds great. And then my two comments, one is noting that there are only 7 schools, which I say only 7, it's still a lot, but this year we obviously had, 18? I just would encourage from the very beginning of the school year, perhaps, opportunities to visit the schools for commissioners and just to like start that process as early as we can, to get as many opportunities for us to out visiting them throughout the start to the renewal process, and beyond, not just visiting those schools then, but just noting that. And then my last comment is on the discussions about changing the process. I won't speak for other members of the board, but I can imagine others would share the sentiment that I have, which is I would love to be participating in some of those processes, engaging more directly in that. I do think this is a matter of governance in the process of how we are, and it's a heavy responsibility that the board does have in this process. So while there's a lot of other things that I would say are more managerial in nature and are not sort of as board involved perhaps, or makes sense to not be as board involved, this is one that I would just elevate as an area for board engagement throughout the process, especially as you are engaging with the broader set of stakeholders in this.
Yep. Our methodology for getting feedback from the board on the changes has been to bring it to teaching and learning, to not be a presentation, but to actually ask, just like we did for each of the stakeholder groups, what the board thinks about the changes, which we give like options A, B, C, what do you think, kinds of things. And so I'm curious if is it more so working with Dr. Judkins, so more members of the board come to that meeting, or if there's other ways that you're interested in participating in that process.
Yeah, I can lift this up. So this is an area that the board has considerable interest in, and so we may want to put our heads together as we approach the summer and into next school year, thinking about how do we spend a little bit more time on this topic and getting a robust set of feedback, not only from the board, but also from our broader stakeholder community. So I just wanted to interject there, because there's just been a lot of conversation around the opportunity to really shape and refine this, and how does that, mesh with our governance responsibilities.
Thank you.
That connects nicely, I guess, in that how do we have conversations about the vision and goal and hopes for charters and how they fit in with the rest of our portfolio? And I guess thinking a little bit about that when we are talking for the service and support for students with disabilities and looking at the piloted element. And I guess just looking at how that new item will be then compared with schools in the rest of the portfolio when you're looking at that level of kind of document tracking and kind of outcomes. Like, that is a great and brilliant thing, and looking at how you can replicate that, looking at what are the outcomes there, and I guess looking at will there be a similar parallel process, kind of what is already in existence within our traditional schools, and kind of what would be moving forward there. Not that our IEP chairs need any more work than they already have, to be very clear, but yes.
That wasn't a question, right? That was.
I guess I was a
Or is your
question.
question there?
If
Yeah.
the answer is no, that's something that we should be talking about and thinking about. That's fine too. But I guess the question, like, are there existing mechanisms that would pair, like what we're asking charters to do? Is there a similar mechanism that we are asking our traditional schools to also do? Because that gives us a point of comparison that we can compare the charter to the traditional schools, and or also how are we replicating those practices? And if we are seeing really brilliant creative practices coming out of that documentation in charters, are we also asking that of our traditional schools? And some of that is I understand we're asking more of our charters. That comes with some of the independence and funding, but from a replication of best practices, what does that look like?
Yeah, I can go first. So I think it's an interesting question, partly because like at this point we don't really know like what the pilot is going to teach us, right? So I think we want to be open to like let's see what it tells us. Like maybe that does foster opportunity for sharing from what we're doing in this space that can be used in other spaces. I want to be careful about sort of making this assumption. It's like, well, we just take it and we're going to replicate the process for the other schools, because as it currently stands in terms of doing this type of an SCR, this is not something that we're doing district wide. So it is specific to our renewal process at this point in time. That doesn't mean that we haven't historically like taken advantage of our lessons learned to be able to share and learn broadly. But I think there's a lot of, let's see what comes of this. But I think the intent around it for sure is like, let's make sure that we're clear around what the bar is. Like, what is the district's expectations around this? And do we have evidence that the charters are actually meeting those expectations? So that's really how the SCR has been designed. It's really about having a framework that sets the standard, and we're measuring to what extent does this data collection help us understand their ability to meet that standard, if that makes sense. And we use frameworks for a lot of things and so it's a really important consideration because that's the way this process was designed to make sure that we were doing that. So even when we talk about making comparisons, it's within this whole philosophy that says there's a standard, but we want to contextualize how that standard is being met by looking within district.
Yeah, and one thing I'll say about like the MSDE compliance review, that kind of review happens across school types, so it's not just charters, but we trigger it to happen at a particular point in time as an additional lens. And then we consider if they've had other site visits that have come up organically through that process. And there's a lot of alignment to how we like look at the work of teachers, how we look at the work of principals with the school works review and like the 5 essentials. There's a lot of alignment in those different processes. So there's there, but it's not a one-to-one, as Chief Jones was sharing.
Sorry about that. I want to thank Angela, and I would thank Chief Jones for their presentation this evening and the work of our entire district that shows just the cross collaboration that does occur from multiple offices inside of the district to really support our entire portfolio. So thank you both this evening.
Thank you. And I just want to quickly acknowledge Tiffany Young on my staff, Chris Swan, Liepa Boberine, Aaron Searson, and Brittany Thompson, who do a lot of the work, the heavy lifting work. We get to look pretty while they're doing the heavy lifting. So I just want to acknowledge.
Thank you. Thank you too. We are going to take a 3 to 5 minute break because we have 2 more items that we do need to cover. We're going to shift gears. We're going to talk a little bit about behavioral interventions policy JKA when we come back, and we'll also hear from our student commissioner and wrap up for the evening. So we'll reconvene in about 3 to 5 minutes just for a brief stretch break. Thank you. So I'd like to grab our crew so we could get started, wrap up, finish up for the evening. Let's start a few. All right, we are moving forward to policy JKA. This is item 9.03 on the agenda for the evening. I'm sorry, 9.02, behavioral intervention, student discipline. So this policy, come on up, team, did come through the policy committee. So I want to thank our chair of policy, Commissioner Esposito, for steering this through. The types of comments and questions that came from our board colleagues were really robust. I want to remind the board that the readout, along with any public comments, are shared broadly with the entire board, so that folks are aware of the kinds of conversations that were happening inside of the committee prior to this arriving here at the board for first reader. I'll turn it over to the team to lead us through. I'm gonna have you go green.
Yeah, there we go. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
We are here this evening. My name is Lori Hines. I'm the Director of Student Conduct and Attendance, and I'm joined by my colleague, Ms. Chandra Worthy Lyde. She has a new last name. From the Office of Special Education. And so tonight we will be bringing you proposed updates to Board Policy JKA, which is the Behavioral Interventions and Student Discipline Policy. It is not. Are they going to project it?
Could I phone a friend? Oh, here we go. It's coming up. There we go.
There we go.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you. And so this policy aligns with board priorities 4 and 7. Priority 4 being that which all of our stakeholders engage to help students in student success in school, and priority 7, where we work toward equity by implementing policies, practices, and procedures to help us have welcoming and inclusive academic as well as professional environments. And so JKA, the policy is accompanied by 5 regulations, JKA-RA through JKA-RE. There are proposed revisions to 4 of the 5 regulations, JKA-RA through JKA-RD, and you can see which one of those are there. These revisions are being proposed because there have been recent changes to COMAR, and we want to align our board policy with the changes to COMAR. We also want to clarify what the process is for in-school suspensions. In our current policy, we have a very clear process for appeals, for short-term suspensions, long-term suspensions, extended suspensions. And so there is no clear process for in-school suspensions. And so we wanted to add that process in the policy as well. And then lastly, we wanted to clarify how we respond when we are notified of a reportable offense. And so those are our proposed changes. And so at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Chandra Worthy Lyde.
It's Hyde, but it's okay.
Hi, I'm sorry.
Good evening, everyone. I will be providing updates on restraints and exclusion. All schools are now required to have a school-based behavior response team, which is composed of 2 to 4 staff members, and they receive annual crisis intervention training. They should have at least 1 administrator on the team, and it does not have to be the principal. It can be anyone that holds an administrative license in the school. It should also include full-time city schools employees and no temporary employees. This year, we have increased the frequency of the training sessions to allow schools more opportunities to be compliant. It's offered on most Tuesdays and Thursdays. Last year was only offered on Thursdays, so we're trying to accommodate the need of of the busy life of the school. The first 30 minutes of every training, we cover the COMAR changes to restraints and how to report. We also have staff members to sign off indicating that they are aware of the policy and how to report. We have transitioned to an online reporting system, and that includes all of the incidents and details of the restraints, along with witness statements and a signature page. And this is reported to MSDE annually, and we check that weekly to make sure that we are not exceeding the number of restraints that are allowed before additional reporting is required. Next slide, please. We are also proposing some revisions to be in alignment with COMAR to the following definitions or terms. Section 504 plan, behavioral intervention plan, which is also referred to as a BIP, mechanical restraint, physical restraint, and serious bodily injury. And if you'd like to see further explanations of those terms, it's in the appendix. Next slide, please. We're proposing some revisions to exclusion, but sometimes people get exclusion and seclusion confused. So I just want to clarify for you, seclusion is not allowed in city schools, and exclusion is allowed, and that's when a student is removed from their educational setting for a short period of time. The time period should not exceed 30 minutes. And during that time period, they are not receiving instruction or special education services. We are now, adding language where staff must provide an opportunity for students to return to the regular classroom setting with strategies where they have been coached on how to self-regulate their own behavior. A lot of schools use the CASTLE framework. It's a free framework, and it teaches students how to become more self-aware, how to manage their emotions and their behaviors, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. The staff members that are in the spaces where students are excluded, they should act in with consistent strategies for evidence-based trauma-informed crisis intervention strategies. City Schools offers verbal de-escalation training on Saturdays for all city school staff members, and we encourage school leaders to have all of their staff members to attend those trainings, and they are offered 2 Saturdays a month. Next slide, please. We do have new guidelines on what is included with physical restraint. The previous language only referenced students with IEPs and BIPs. We are now including students with Section 504 plans. We're also updating the deadlines for reporting restraints to parents and MSDE. Parents now must be notified within 24 hours of the restraint. Our city schools best policy practice during our training sessions, we tell schools to inform parents immediately, and the mode of communication to families are indicated on the electronic reporting form when they report the restraint. Schools have 4 business days after the 10th incident of restraint to provide notice to the Office of Special Education, and then we have 4 days to notify MSDE of the excessive restraints that are occurring with a particular student. We also have 10 business days after the notice of the 10th restraint to provide recommendations to MSDE and to the schools. We've also updated language about when the physical restraint should be removed. Previously, it referenced only a 30-minute maximum time period for restraints. We now have added that the restraint should be discontinued when the student no longer possesses a threat of imminent or serious physical harm. We are also clarifying how to prevent restraints from happening in the future. We also inform schools that restraints should be used as a last resort, but the training that they go through crisis intervention training, there's a module that teaches them how to de-escalate and reflect to prevent the restraints from happening in the future. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to turn it over to Lori.
Thank you. So just a bit of an overview about recent or fairly recent updates to city schools practices. So in school year 22-23, we did very intense stakeholder sessions with our stakeholders, various stakeholders, and we have stakeholder sessions every year. As a matter of fact, we are in the midst of our stakeholder feedback sessions now. But that year in particular, we had a lot of feedback, and because of that feedback, we made several changes to our code of conduct. The code of conduct, the changes were implemented in school year 23-24, and that summer of 23 in August at our Operations Institute, there was mandatory training for our administrators in how to implement these changes within the code of conduct. So another proposed revision is around reportable offenses. And so this revision, it just clarifies and it explains how we respond when we're notified of a reportable offense. There has been a very extensive process that has been put in place in collaboration with different offices. So the Office of Legal, the school's office, school police, we all have come together, and there was as I stated, an extensive process that has been designed when we receive a reportable offense. And so the first thing that happens is the student and their family, they come to a safety risk meeting. And so at that meeting, it's determined whether that student poses what they did outside of the district poses a safety risk to students in city schools. And there is a safety plan that is developed. After that, there needs to be a determination to see if that child poses an imminent threat of serious harm at their particular school. And if so, then they would receive a new placement. And then there are some additional requirements if the student is arrested for rape or sexual offense. But in all of that, it's important to note that there is an appeal process, and that appeal process takes place if the parent or the student wishes for both the safety plan and the if they pose a imminent threat and they are assigned to a different school. And so all of this language is aligned with COMAR. Administrators were trained again at the Operations Institute at the beginning of this school year around the plan, and then again once the school year started, because the plan was really flushed out, and so they received a more intense training once the school year began around the reportable offense process. So in JKARB, which is our student suspension and expulsion regulation, JKARB that accompanies JKA, we added language, as I stated before, to clarify that in-school suspension appeals process. We also put a process in where parent or guardians can appeal if they are not in agreement with the in-school suspension, then they can make an appeal to the chief of school's office within 10 days. And then the principal supervisor, which we call the ILED, they have to write a written response to the appeal within 5 days of receiving the appeal. And then lastly, if the parent or guardian is still not in agreement with the ILED's decision, then they can follow board policy BLA, and they can appeal to the board with that process. And then lastly, if administrators, because for extended suspensions and long-term suspensions, administrators must call into the Office of Student Conduct and Attendance to receive approval for those types of suspensions. And so if they are not in agreement with our office's decision, then they can escalate it to the chief of school's office. And so there's a process that has been added into the policy to document that appeal process. We have had extensive stakeholder engagement and feedback around these proposed revisions. This is just a timeline of some of the engagements we've had. We've gone and we presented both in person and virtually with several groups. We just had a a virtual meeting with the Public Justice Center, the Office of the Public Defender, Disability Rights Maryland. It was a whole group of our stakeholders. And we had a discussion virtually, but then they also provided us written feedback. And then the other stakeholders, groups that you see, we have presented at some of their meetings as well. And then this is just a summary that you can look at your own time of responses to feedback that we have received. So as I stated, some of the groups submitted written feedback to us. And so we always want to respond to the feedback that we receive. And we take that feedback very seriously. Before I came to this office, it was more of a compliance thing around, feedback. And so they would say, okay, I know 3 principals. And so they would reach out to the 3 principals and say, okay, what do you think about the code of conduct or this policy? And they would, give them their opinion. And it was like a check. Okay, we got it from the stakeholders. And can you ask 3 of your teachers to give us some feedback, right? And so when I came, I really wanted organic feedback. And so I opened up the process. So we collaborated with BTU. And so we had a forum where I went to BTU and all teachers were invited. So we want everyone's feedback, not just a select few feedbacks. And so we have a total of 6 stakeholder feedback sessions. Since the pandemic, we have done them virtually. And so we have conducted 5 of them, and our final feedback session will be held on this Thursday, and that one is for administrators. That will be our final feedback session for the code of conduct this coming Thursday. And that is just more of the responses to the feedback we received. And then lastly, our timeline on February the 18th, we presented to the policy committee of the board. Tonight, we are presenting first reader. And then as we continue, because we are continuing to receive feedback around this policy. And so June the 10th, we will be back for second reader.
Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate the work that you've done on that. Before I open up to our board colleagues, I just want to defer to our policy chair with anything that she'd like to lift up this evening.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I appreciate that you all reached out to all those groups and incorporated their feedback. I think that's really important so that, they don't have to try to get us to move in a different direction, after the fact. And also, you said that you're in the midst of getting feedback right now too. So as you collect all that, would you be able to let us know if there was an improvement from past changes that you all made that resulted in different feedback
Sure.
or more positive
Feedback.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Mhm.
I'll go. I had a question about the restraints. Using yeah. Disclaimer, I'm a special needs mom. So I have a question about it. With students who may exhibit behavior that maybe they may need restraints, have we kind of reached out to parents directly around changes, or to even let parents know that there's a possibility if their child exhibits a certain behavior in school that they may be restrained? Have we done that level of work?
No, but every time a restraint is proposed to be on a student's IEP, the
Mhm.
parent is invited to the meeting, and they can agree or disagree with the decision that's made, and they can file an appeal. But the city schools does reserve the right to also get approval to continue with the restraint if it's deemed necessary for the student as the only resort that we can use to keep the child and other students safe during the school day. But the parent is invited to give their input on whether or not the restraint should be used. But I want to highlight that we always use restraints as a last resort.
Right.
We try many other strategies before resorting to a restraint.
And are those the only students that, so let's say it's like a fight or something. Is it ever a situation where school police might have to restrain a student if they're really, really, I don't know at this point in the day, I'm lost for the proper term. But like if students are fighting and they feel like they have to like, pull them back, is that ever a situation with just typically development students?
So, to intervene in a fight, that's allowed, but a temporary hold or
Like just to
escort,
hold them,
mhm,
right?
that's
Okay.
allowed. That's not considered something that we need to report.
Mhm.
But school police restraints are the primary responsibility of the school and the school team. And school police intervenes if needed, if something escalates to a criminal situation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Rooks.
Thank you. I'm not sure if Vice Chair had already asked this question, but is there like, I wouldn't even say for only special needs. I would say for all students technically. Some students do have anger issues or other issues that they might be occurring on that day. So other than restraints, I know the restraints is the last resort, but is there a strategy that you all are going to parents and asking them, or what should we do when your child is having a bad day, or what should we plan for just for future references, just in case?
So many schools engage in social and emotional strategies to support students who may need additional behavioral interventions. All schools are supposed to be engaging in positive behavioral interventions. We in the Office of Special Education monitor referral data. So we monitor also days of remove. So if we notice that there's a pattern of a student being overly suspended or overly referred, we reach out to the school and we meet with the IEP chair. And if it's a general education student, we collaborate with the special education school success liaison. There's a new term for it, but also the other people that are supporting the school. For general ed students, we also collaborate with the wholeness office, who will go in and provide additional strategies around how to support the student. But it's the students receive support based on an individual need, whether they are a student with disabilities or a general education student. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, it did. Thank you.
Commissioner Messenger.
Hi. Two questions. I think first of all, I wanted to thank you for your just persistent engagement with people. I got to sit on a couple of these sessions and I appreciated it. I think also just looking with the work around restraint and seclusion, the state and also the district has done a really good job about thinking about how are we succinctly communicating with parents, realizing that it is a very structured, very legal process that is not necessarily very accessible. And so I guess in that light, looking at the lessons learned in terms of the suspension process, kind of what's been taken, what steps have been taken to look to improve communication with families, not just on how to appeal, but also communicating like, what is the process? What is the expectations? What are your options for additional services? Because ultimately the goal is that we have kids in school learning in an environment, like you were saying, Dylan, that is like, that works for everyone. And so I guess looking at just what are the mechanisms that have been, of how we're using to connect with parents and communities and students to walk them through challenging periods for everyone involved.
I used to be a school leader, and so as a school leader, I would have sessions where monthly, where we would invite parents up. And I'm speaking from my own personal experience because I still know that schools engage in a very similar process where they invite parents up. And we were a school that focused on social and emotional learning. So we made sure that we got parents' input on anything that we were going to pilot at the school. We didn't have a whole lot of funding. That's why I referred to the free resource that many city schools use, which is the CASEL framework. And we would provide learning opportunities that focused on one of the 5 components on a monthly basis, where we practice what our climate should look like. So I can speak for myself as a former school leader. I went from a school that in my early years, we suspended students, but in my later years, suspension was not an option because we utilized the student wholeness room. We utilized peace common corners, and we just trained our students how to self-regulate their own behaviors. Was it a perfect environment? We still had some disagreements, but there were minimal fights, and we were a restorative environment. So the wholeness office does provide many strategies for school leaders, including restorative practice training, where they're teaching schools how to minimize behavioral incidents for students.
Thank you. I guess, and maybe this is less of a question and more of a comment to kind of follow up on later is, but thinking about like, how are we actually using the documentation and communication platters? You're like, there's a form letter for lots of this, like there's a documentation burner, but like, how are we using the tools of communication that are being sent home around suspension to be able to engage families and students so that it doesn't become a reoccurring trend?
So there are forms that we have for Baltimore City that are, Comar says that we have to have like proper documentation, right? So it's very important, first and foremost, that we give students their due process, right? And then after they are given their due process, part of that due process is giving them the paperwork to take home. And so there is a student letter, and it explains, you know, all of their rights to them. And the administrator has to review this with the student, and they have to sign it before, you know, leaving for their suspension. There is also a parent letter. So there's a parent conference that happens at the school level, and the parent gets that documentation as well. And then if it is an extended or well, not long-term, but an extended suspension, the family has to come here to district office, to the Office of Student Conduct and Attendance, and there is a hearing that is held. And so we have worked very hard in our office to have that process be a very restorative process. All of our team members have been trained in restorative practices. And that was one of the office's goals, right, was to be very restorative and not have this be a punitive. So oftentimes, you know, children are coming in and it's like it's a bad thing, but we turn it around and it's like a good thing for a fresh start for them. And so that documentation is, you know, sent home with them and everything is documented. We also have a database, and Infinite Campus is our database, but there is a behavioral module within Infinite Campus that everything has to be documented step by step. So what date and what time was the parent conference held? When was a phone call made home, you know, to the parent? And every step of the suspension process is documented there. And then just for further documentation, again, there is an approval process from our office. So actually Comar only requires that prior approvals be given for extended suspensions, which are suspensions over 10 days. So 11 to 44, or expulsions, which are 45 or more days. However, our policy, JKA, has gone a step further. And the reason that we did that was so that it would be more equity amongst the suspensions for long term. So for 4 to 10, schools also must get approval for that suspension, because there was just too much inequity. Like school A, this was happening and they would get 4 days, and then school B, the same thing was happening and that student would get 10 days. And so to try to even, you know, the agreement and to kind of give a norm, then that's why we have the approval of the long-term suspension as well. Yes, he
Thank-
was.
What's that?
Okay.
2 quick questions. Thank
Yeah.
you. One on the in-school suspensions. If a student has already been, if a student has served their 3-day in-school suspension and then the appeal comes down and it's overturned, what happens? I mean, they've already served it, so what happens in that case?
Yep. So they have already served it, and so it is rescinded, and so it is like kind of wiped clean from their record. So we take the suspension marking away and we change it to an excused absence, and then that suspension, if it's rescinded, is taken off of their disciplinary record.
But
it's not on their record. I mean, they've already served the time out of school,
Right.
so we can't have, like, we
That's what
can't
I
mark
was-
them present,
Yeah.
but we do mark it as an excused absence.
Sure,
And
and I
then we
was-
remove it from the record.
Yeah, I mean, I was more thinking about the 3 days of, I mean, yes, the record is important, but also thinking about the 3 days of school they missed, but.
So,
Yeah,
so because it's an in-school, I mean, whether it's in school or out of school, they still have to have their classwork and assignments. So
right.
they would not be, missing
Sure.
their.
Yeah, it's not the same as sitting in class, but I understand that the constraints. I mean, it's,
Yeah.
an appeal you got to get the paperwork together, someone has to hear it. It makes a lot of sense.
And just like for the record, to let you know, students cannot serve more than 5 days of out-of-school suspension per semester, and they cannot serve more than 3 days of in-school suspension per incident. So let's say, I got suspended in September, and that was for like 2 days, and then I got another like 3 days. That would be it for that first semester. I could not be, and there's no more than 10 days in a total school year that a student can serve in school suspension.
Thank you.
Mhm.
The other question was on the other end of the spectrum. As you're getting feedback, I'm curious if you've heard feedback from either students or teachers or school leaders who feel like they don't actually have the tools that they need in their toolbox to keep their classrooms orderly so that students can learn, or keep their schools places where the focus is on student learning. And if so, what is the response to that? Do you think that's an implementation thing? Do you think there's something in policy that we need to look at? But I'm curious if you get that feedback.
So my office deals mainly with the compliance of suspensions, but in the same office are our friends from climate and culture. And so there are like specialists, we have climate coaches. If we, have that issue, there are others that will go out to support schools if they are experiencing challenges with behavior in their school.
Commissioner, I'm sorry, please.
No, and I did just want to add that I think some context is important, and the work that Lori, or I should say Director Hines, has done with the wholeness team around the school climate, I think has been important, particularly coming out of the pandemic. And I do just want to put a pin for everyone that a lot of the changes that I think we thoughtfully implemented and adjusted was because of the extreme behaviors that we had coming out of the pandemic. And I just want to be straightforward about that. I think Lori has been great in making sure, along with Chief Sivan, that we don't go overboard. But I do think when she described the work that we did with school leaders, the training, there was a response to, frankly, what schools across the country and across the state were experiencing, and frankly, parent feedback that we were receiving exponentially, that restorative should not mean that victims of violence are tolerated. And that came from our parent community. That was not. So I think, one, that's an important pin to put in this. And then I think the other piece has been the focus work we've done with the wholeness team and frankly the schools team. And we've had discussions about this, that actually school climate, right, has to be the starting place. And I think the work that team has done that you just heard referenced is more of that preventative work. So I will just be forthright that it has been a balancing act. I think staff has done a very good job at wanting to make sure that we are restoring young people, that we are not tossing young people away. But frankly, we were hearing, and I took a lot of those calls from, I had community people coming to me on the side and saying, look, you're giving kid a 1-day suspension. They're coming out here laughing at you all. And that's what I heard when I was going to barber shops and every place else. And so in the reset, what we thought was important was not to have it just be a punitive response, but to reset based on some of the conditions, like group fights, I think is a great, and we worked with legal, we worked with school leaders who did not feel like they had a tool in their toolbox to handle 7 kids on one, which is different than 2 kids in a hallway. But with that, I think we're also committed, which is what we're seeing, is this targeted support for school leaders around what does a positive school climate look like so that you're not having those incidents, so that you can actually, frankly, have more of the environment that I experienced at Reach, or the change, frankly, in Patterson High School over the last 2 or 3. I mean, I'll just name real schools that had real issues that when the culture and climate were worked on proactively, it left far less room, right, that then people were trying to cover up with suspension. So we worked really hard, but I want to be transparent that we were balancing and are still balancing. And I know, our newest commissioner knows from his time on PCAP, this was a very big issue, right, for a number of our parents for many years who felt as if restorative meant kids had no consequences and my kid could get beaten up or targeted and nothing would happen. So we've tried to be very intentional with balancing both, hearing our community. I think the engagement piece, that Ms. Hines and Ms. I got to get your, is that okay? Hyde and Ms. Hyde were describing, I think, is that balancing act that we've had. But I think it's important for the board to know that it sounds really nice the way you put it out here, but the amount of work and detailed balancing that they're doing, that their colleagues in Wholeness are doing, and frankly, the whole school's office has been doing, is a lot of work. It's not just everybody, we just restore and move on. It's been defining what that means and having to build that proactively. So I just wanted to say that because you two sitting up there makes it sound so like, oh yeah, and we just, da 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 da. And it's not that. It's not. It's real. And like I said, I had parents stopping me at Trader Joe's. Like, what are you doing? My kid had this or that. And I'm like, look, I was just trying to get, my grocery shopping done. But I'm stopping because it was in real time that we were feeling it. But I think it's a credit to the team that coming out of that post-pandemic, really, frankly, challenging time, we have tried to recalibrate and reset and hold both things true while still restoring kids to where they need to be.
So to piggyback on Dr. S, it is, like she said, it's not an either or, and that's what we really try to emphasize. It's a both and. So we are going to implement restorative practices and methods, but sometimes you're going to get suspended as well. There is we call it we don't call it a consequence, we call it a disciplinary response. So there is going to be a disciplinary response, but we are still going to restore. So even afterwards. And so we have a whole new position, our safety mediation specialist, right? And so when there is an issue and the school, it's escalated beyond the school, then there is a whole position here that the school, the administrators and the families come here, and there's a person who can sit down and mediate the issue before it can possibly get to a suspension. And so that has been very helpful as well.
I appreciate both of those responses. The reason I ask is because I think policy, it's sometimes hard to get the balancing act right in policy. It's just words on a paper and it tells you what you can and can't do. And I think in some cases we have situations where the policy needs to be a little more restrictive because you have folks making decisions for kids that are not fully upholding their rights that they should have. And in other cases, I think you have situations where students quite frankly aren't getting enough disciplinary action because students don't feel like they're able to sit in a classroom and learn. So the reason why I ask is because I think it's just hard to get right in policy. But I appreciate the nuance in the answer. Did you have a follow-up?
Oh, I appreciated the context and the thoughtful work that went into it, into just the evolution of the work. I think one of the premises I thought of your question was really around engagement of teachers and informing this first reader or second reader. And BTU is a normal part of the cadence, right, of engagement. And just wanting to confirm that you had talked to parents, students as a part of this process or are in the process of doing so.
Yeah.
I'd like to wrap it up with Commissioner Kenyatta Bay for final.
Thank you.
set of-
Real quick, and this is just an observation from living in a classroom day to day. Okay, and I know there are tiers before it reaches a certain level, even suspension. You know, you have your teacher, then you have your APs, and then you have your principal. But sometimes I don't see the delineation between, and there are two different categories. There's students that have learning disabilities that we give an IEP to that helps them get through hurdles that in their learning process. And then we have the 504 that is their reaction is a little bit different because it is trauma related in its initiation. Is there a clear historical delineation? Because as I know historically, there are groups, you know, that get more of the suspensions, more of the restraints, more of, you know, how have we made that playing field a little more even? Because, you know, I mean, holistic thought processing is was already being initiated in the school system in Baltimore City before the pandemic, you know, and it was growing. Pandemic kind of wiped it out for a second, and then it's reinstituted now. Have we made a healing in that historical inequity in how we administer these reactionary actions? Thank you.
So Ms. Worthy Hyde's office and my office, we work very closely together. So every time there is a suspension that is called in to my office and the student receives special education services or has an IEP, it goes down, that same suspension goes down to her office. So what was happening previously was that, like, let's say a student was proposed for an extended suspension. So we have to hold our meeting by the 10th day. So that's already almost, 10 days. Then they would come and then they would find out that, oh, this wasn't implemented from the IEP or that wasn't implemented. And that was the whole reason for the suspension. And so it was like later on, because the student had already, been suspended for all of those days. So to alleviate that, we created a position. It's a compliance discipline person in her office. Before we had one, now we have 3. And so as soon as the suspension is called into us, it goes down to her as well. And they began looking at the case. They began reviewing the IEP, looking at if the student has a BIP or 504. A manifestation meeting by COMAR, it has to be held by the 10th day. But our best practice for Baltimore City Schools, because our suspension hearings has to happen by the 10th day, they have to hold their manifestation meeting by the 5th day. Okay, and so by the time they get to our suspension hearing, sometimes the suspension is rescinded because we know that it is a manifestation of their disability. And then the Office of Special Ed will work with the school, to implement supports, for that student because they can't be, suspended because their IEP was not implemented. So that has really like cut back on the length and the time of students who should not be suspended because they have a disability that was not addressed, or their accommodations or their, a bit was not, put in place. And so that's really cut back on the length of time that students are spending out of school that should not be suspended.
We also receive a weekly student with disability discipline tracker, where we're able to monitor referrals, we're able to monitor suspensions. The team of 3 specialists that Ms. Director Hines referred to, weekly, we receive a compliance report that flags students that have IEPs, but also students with 504 plans. So we're able to track any disciplinary incident for those students. We send out communication. We monitor in increments of 5, 8, and 10 days removed. So before they even get to Director Hines's office, we are monitoring the disciplinary incidents for those students, and the specialists reach out to the IEP chair to provide some additional supports. And if it's a student that has a BIP, we dive deeper into the BIP to make sure that it's aligned to the behaviors that the student is displaying. You're welcome.
I thank the team very much for thoughtful presentation, the work that you guys have done, and we look forward to seeing you again soon for second reader in June.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just want to make sure our colleagues know on the board, as well as the public, at the request of our student commissioner, we are going to move his comments forward to our May 13th meeting, which will be more aligned with an upcoming event. So we're happy to accommodate that, but we'll move you earlier in the agenda because I'm really looking forward to hearing more about ASCBC general election. We have a couple of upcoming events that I do want to put on everybody's radar. So actually, I want to turn it to Commissioner Ames Messenger for one that's transpiring this week.
All right, to all the people mainly who work here. We have a reminder coming up that the Mayor's Office of Children and Family will be hosting a virtual information session. We have a seat that will be opening up for the school board, and they are looking for applicants. So there'll be current commissioners there to ask questions and talk about the work of the board and how you can be a part. It will be Thursday, April 24th from 5:30 to 6:30. There's information on the website, or you can email the school board email.
Excellent, thank you. And I just want to turn it to Commissioner Mohammed for the Safety and Wholeness Listening Tour coming up next week.
The board will be holding a listening tour targeting safety and wholeness. If this is important to you, which it should be important to us all, we'll be at Patterson High School on the 30th at 5:30. We hope to see everyone there. And if you were on the fence about coming out or not, we'll be serving dinner. So come on out and have your voice be heard to the entire board. And know that this is a session that when your voice is heard, we have to respond in writing. So this is your opportunity to have public comment that does not have a clock associated to it. So we will see you at Patterson Park, Patterson High School. I love Patterson Park too, but we'll see you at Patterson High School on the 30th of this month at 5:30.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Mohammed, and we'll be back here on May 13th, particularly focusing on our budget vote, along with other important items that will come up that day. Is there a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting? Thank you. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor by signaling aye.
Aye.
Thank you so much. We'll see you guys again soon.